Well, good day and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Kenneth Kahn, and I serve as Dean of Cleveland State University's Monte College of Business. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our October 2021 session, part of our Cornerstone Speaker Series. The college last year adopted a new strategic plan with a vision to serve as Northeast Ohio's business cornerstone. So obviously, based on this focus of being a cornerstone, we have our Cornerstone Speaker Series. This stems from our three pillars to provide Northeast Ohio with business-ready talent, impactful business knowledge, and foundational community engagement. And today's speaker series is an illustration of our third pillar. Related to all three pillars, I just would like to take the opportunity to ask that if you are thinking about working with a business school, whether it's class projects, internships, looking for full-time employment, our students, if you're looking for professional development opportunities, looking for an MBA or any other graduate degree in business, please seriously consider the Monte College Business. So now it's my pleasure to introduce today's panel moderator, who is our own college's Dr. Tracy Porter. So a little bit about Dr. Porter, and then I'll turn it over to her to introduce our speakers. Dr. Porter is an associate professor in the Department of Management here in the Monte College of Business. Her teaching focuses on healthcare management and human resource management. Prior to entering academia, Dr. Porter worked full-time in the healthcare field, both in the area of large practice management and healthcare consulting. With that, I will turn this over to Dr. Tracy Porter. Dr. Porter, welcome.
Thank you, Dean Kahn. It is my pleasure to serve as your moderator today, and I'd first like to introduce our two esteemed speakers. So first we have Carolyn Lekan with Sherwin-Williams. So Carolyn, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carolyn Lekan, and I am the Vice President of Human Resources for our corporate division and headquarters site at Sherwin. I have been here for 23 years and started actually my senior year at Cleveland State as an intern when I was finishing my bachelor's degree in management and labor relations. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. And next we have Steve Pallotti with Eaton Corporation. If you would introduce yourself, please.
Thanks, Tracy. Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Pallotti. I lead the HR function for Eaton's electrical sector. I'm based here in Cleveland. I've been with Eaton for 35 years, and I'm a proud Cleveland State undergrad, although I know how the HR guy had a degree in marketing. But anyways, I'm looking forward to sharing our experiences with you today.
Thank you very much. So before we jump in and listen to our esteemed speakers, I'd like to share some statistics with you. So Heather, if you could share that slide, please. So I found some interesting statistics. So certainly this was just one particular study. So we were looking at remote work before, during, and after the pandemic. So before the pandemic, January of 2020, only 6% of all employees worked from home. Now, most of these people were highly educated office workers. So, they worked, they were accountants, people such as that. 75% of employees had never worked from home, and 19% did a little bit of remote work. During the pandemic, May of 2020, 33% of employees worked from home. What is interesting is obviously primarily these were highly educated people just like before, but 10% of these individuals were in the production, transportation, construction, and maintenance fields. And certainly the 33% looks a little bit low, but we know a lot of companies closed for periods of time. After the pandemic, or some might say toward the tail end, December 2020, 83% of employees want to permanently implement some sort of limited remote work or want to be fully remote. And that was 33% of those individuals. So stop sharing the screen, please. All right, so just to kind of get us started. So the first speaker we're going to hear from is Carolyn Lekan. And whenever you're ready.
So just to give you a little bit of information about Sherwin-Williams, we have 61,000 employees globally, and they're in a variety of different work environments. So we have our retail stores, which most people are familiar with, but we also have manufacturing plants, distribution centers. We have a fleet of transportation vehicles who move our products. We have research and development facilities, as well as a variety of different office locations. And those are located in over 45 different countries throughout the world. So a lot of different locations and different situations that we had to look at when we looked at the COVID pandemic and how we were going to handle our workforce. So to start with, just a little bit about pre-COVID and what did we look like. So as Dr. Porter shared, we did have some flexible work schedules. We did have some people that were working remotely, but it was a very small percentage. We did allow people who had the capability and technology to be able to work from home for emergency situations. Maybe, their hot water tank went out and they needed to have somebody come in and fix it. So it was fairly rare. We did have some pilot programs with different flexible work arrangements. So for example, we have our customer support group, and they had agents that were working from home 100% of the time for many years. So we did have some experience with it, and we had a very good opportunity during the Republican National Convention in 2016 to try out what it would look like to have everyone work remotely. So we're very close to Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, and because of the distance from where the convention was being held, we had to shut down our headquarters facility. So did a lot of preparatory work to make sure everyone had the appropriate hardware, that they were able to connect from home. So that was a very good pilot for us to ensure that we could make this work. And we learned a lot from that. So since that time, we've upgraded our technology to improve our collaboration and also ensure we had the appropriate security in place. So we moved to the Microsoft suite of collaboration tools, including our Teams platform. So very similar to Zoom, the ability to meet with people and be able to look at each other face to face while sharing material. So we were utilizing that, but obviously not as heavily as we are today. We also had tools such as OneDrive and SharePoint, which allowed us to share resources and materials and collaborate. And for some of our very key systems that had highly confidential data, we began implementing multi-factor authentication. So similar to what you're used to when you log into, say, a bank account or a financial institution, where you have to certify your identity and they can make sure that the person logging in is who they say they are. Then we get to January 2020. So being a global company, we have employees all around the world. And as things started developing in China, we very quickly had to address how are we going to handle employees that are working in our offices, our plants, and our R&D facilities. So quickly moved to, some of our employees shifting 100% work from home, and which, as Dr. Porter said, for a lot of those people, they had never done that before. So this was definitely some trial and error and a new experience for them. As things kept escalating in January and February, similar situation with our teams in Europe, and starting to put more people at home as countries and locations were shutting down. When we got to March 2020, obviously here in the US, the cases were rising, and we had to make the decision of what we were doing with our operations. So we did make the decision to send the majority of our office-based employees to work from home. We did keep our sites open. There were some people that, based on the type of role that they held and business necessity, they were still coming into the office buildings. But for the large part, all of our manufacturing operations were still continuing. Our retail stores were open, but they had to very quickly pivot to things such as an online ordering system and curbside pickup of products. So an awful lot of work in a very short period of time to ensure that we still had business continuity and could run the operations, but just in a very, very different way. We did start bringing employees back to our offices in May of 2020. Some of the executives began coming back in June of 2020. Directors and above were coming into the office a couple days a week. And we had plans for October 2020 that we were going to start bringing employees back to the office. And unfortunately, COVID had different plans. Cases began to rise again, and we had to postpone that. So ultimately, in May of 2021 was when we began a rotational program and brought our employees back to the office just a little bit to get that collaboration and the innovation that we're used to as part of our company. So we started the rotational program in May 2020, and then in June, we announced that we were moving to a global flexible workplace policy. And so that was really our official stance of we are now moving to a hybrid model. So we've proven during COVID that, people have the capability to work from home. They have the tools and resources. They're able to meet the deadlines and provide the services that we needed. But we also need to have that connectivity with each other and to the company. And in order to maintain our culture, decided that, we needed to have a hybrid model. So our model is that they're in the office 3 days a week, and then they're at home 2 days a week. So to talk a little bit about what those current practices are, we do have several different options. The first one being the remote work. So as I described, they can be in the office 3 days a week and at home up to 2 days a week. We also made some changes to our flexible hours. We had already had flexible work schedules, but we had made a little bit broader opportunities with some of those different types of hours. And we also introduced summer hours that during the summer months, if they worked the hours during the week and they had things completed that needed to be, they could take off every other Friday. So this is our new global model. This is what we plan on continuing as we move forward based on the lessons learned from COVID. Some of the things that really were the drivers of that policy, we had a lot of requests prior to COVID from candidates and employees inquiring about the ability to work remotely. Once COVID hit and we had everybody, working from home on a more frequent basis, it became a business imperative. It is what is expected from candidates and from employees. And in order to be competitive, it's something that we need to offer. We really feel that it has increased employee engagement and morale. It assists with retention. It also, in some cases, can increase efficiency and effectiveness and give us a competitive place in the market to attract candidates. Our culture is very relationship-based. We need to connect with each other and we need to collaborate, and it's how we innovate. So we really wanted to make sure that our employees had that opportunity to connect with each other by being together. And we also wanted to make sure we were providing the appropriate development opportunities for our people. And this caused us to make some changes. So we increased our use of Teams for meetings as well as interviews. We were using Teams before, as I said, but now it's different. We're hybrid. You always have some people in the office and some people at home. So it's an absolute necessity to have a tool that allows us to all connect at one time. Another thing that we had made a change was dress for your day, and moving from a business casual to an even more casual dress code policy. So they could wear jeans if it was appropriate for their day. If they had a meeting or a presentation, they were having customers in. If it was appropriate, then they would dress business casual or business formal. We also implemented with our cafeteria mobile order and payment, which has been very positive. So it's helping us, move people through and get their orders and be able to pay in a way where they don't have to have as much interaction. So that one's been very positively received. Some of the other things that we did during the pandemic and that we're continuing to offer is our wellness initiatives. So additional support through our employee assistance program. We also started broadcasting our fitness classes and allowing employees, not only that used to be members of the facility and would come in, but all employees to be able to utilize those services and be able to watch and join the classes remotely. So want to talk a little bit about some of the best practices and things that we learned throughout this experience. And the first one by far is about being flexible and adaptable. It is an absolute must. As things continue to change, you have to be able to adapt to them. We also wanted to give people as much notice as possible for these changes, which was extremely appreciated. We would give people 2 months notice before we were making a change, so they had time to make the appropriate arrangements at home, whether it was for childcare, elder care, or even just to get comfortable with the changes that were coming and ask questions. So we really felt that, that additional notice time was something very important. Also explaining the why behind what we were doing. In situations like these, there's no such thing as over communicating. So we made sure that there was more frequent communication and that we were giving them more of an explanation around our thought process, why we were doing what we were doing. We also shared with them the resources that we were using to make these decisions. So we were looking at CDC guidance, partnering with medical experts at University Hospital. We had a team of individuals within the company from environmental health and safety, human resources, a lot of people who were all looking at the situation and making the best decision that we could in order to protect our employees and still be able to successfully run our business. We had our leadership modeling these new initiatives, and I think that that's really imperative for adoption. So, having people understand that this flexible work policy, everyone has the ability to do that. If you don't see your leaders doing it, chances are we're going to have employees that are not going to do it because they don't think that it's, a real program or that it's actually supported. So we've really been working with our leadership to model these new norms. Another thing is helping retool our managers. It's different to manage a hybrid workforce. So really giving them a lot of extra resources, everything from talking points to help them answer questions from employees, reminding them of opportunities they have to show gratitude and appreciation, using our Celebrate app where they can recognize the work that their employees are doing, making an effort to really be visible and making sure people are having what we've called casual collisions. So conversations, running into someone and being able to talk and discuss an idea, and really have that time to collaborate and innovate, and making sure while they were in the office that those things were happening. We've also given them a lot of suggestions on, how do you engage your team? Again, when you have people both in front of you in the office as well as, working from home, what are best practices for that? How do you make time to ensure the whole team is collaborating together and that everybody is having opportunities? And certainly, again, having our managers set that example for their team, making sure that they're working from home and taking advantage of the new program. And, every company culture is different. We had to do what was right for us. And, we had several times where employees would come and say, did you see what this organization is doing? Or, here's a company that's allowing their employees to continue to work from home 100% of the time. And that might have been the right decision for that company. But for us, we had to do what was right for our organization. And we know that not everybody, might be looking for the same type of opportunities, but this is absolutely the hybrid model where we felt that we needed to be in order to give our employees the flexibility that they needed in their life, but also be able to continue to live our values and maintain our company culture. And what we found out of this was that you can survive with 100% remote work, but you cannot thrive. And for us, it's very important to maintain our company culture and continue to live those values. So in the end, what's staying at Sherwin, it's those values and the culture, that sense of community and collaboration, innovation, and being able to develop our people, but allowing that increased flexibility. One of the great examples that we had out of this was our women's club has a women's conference. And this year, because of the COVID situation, we made it virtual and we were allowed to reach a global audience and have much more participation. So definitely something that will be staying with us. And what's going away is putting a focus on who's working from where and when. Making sure that we're giving people the flexibility to do what they need when they need to, but still be able to work together to accomplish our goals.
Thank you very much. Excellent points you've made. And I wanted to say before, make sure that if you have any thoughts that you want to share, please utilize the chat box or also the Q&A. We will allow time at the very end for your questions. Absolutely. So our next speaker, Steve Pallotti with Eaton Corporation.
All right. Well, look, what you're going to find is, Eaton's story actually isn't significantly different than Sherwin-Williams in many aspects. Many of the things that happened, we did it highly relates to what Carolyn just highlighted. Maybe one thing that I would like to add, because the pre-COVID thing was pretty similar. Our flex work practices had been deployed a couple years in advance of COVID. I must say our uptake wasn't great. Some of that was maybe due to cultural issues. Some of that might be maybe managers weren't really so open for those arrangements. And so, but we had a framework for that. The other thing that really helped us when we had to go virtual for a period of time, our IT systems, we had already made the move to Microsoft Office. We were using Teams, we were using Outlook, we were using OneDrive. And so we were able to pivot very quickly when it was time to put our workforce remote around the world. And so that really helped us adapt quite rapidly. And so it wasn't hard for us to pivot. So what I wanted to do is maybe just give you some views. Look, here's a bunch of stuff you can read. I'm not going to go through all of these, but look, if you think about now going forward, if you're an HR leader, a business leader, and you're running an enterprise and you're not flexible with how your work gets done, you are going to be at a significant disadvantage because everyone else is doing this, right? So if you think that, gee, I just can't find a way to do that, your ability to cast your net to attract talent is going to be significantly impacted. And so here's some examples of mostly large companies doing this, and there's some interesting statistics from LinkedIn, in the lower right hand corner. But look, this is the new way of working. Now, it doesn't mean you have to go all the way to completely remote. I think most companies will land where Eaton and Sherwin-Williams are landing with some sort of a hybrid model. But it's the number one thing people are looking for in their employment is flexibility. And so I'll show you a chart here. This is from, I'm on something called the Labor Council of the Conference Board. And this is from the spring of 2021. And the way you read this chart is the blue bars are online job ads for different kind of professions where they indicated that remote work or flexibility was part of the job description. And then the orange bar this is from a year ago to now. And you can see it's a significant recruiting tool for employees to use where you're actually actively marketing whether a job has remote or flexible work practices as part of the job, because it's a tool now that you almost have to have, especially for professional level jobs. And so when you think about what happened with COVID, if nothing else, it maybe created an opportunity for us to think differently about how we attract talent. And it allows us to fish in different, fishing holes that we'd have never thought to fish in before. And that leads to a lot of other things in terms of increasing our diversity of thought, increasing, where we're going to pull people from. And so, but that comes with challenges, of course, because if you're going to be okay with remote work, you have to modify a bit how you're going to manage that. So I'll go to this. So our global flexible work solutions has really six options between when you work, a flex time or a compressed work week, where you work, telework, where you work, part-time from home and part-time from the office, or part-time from another location, or fully remote. And then how much you work, whether it's job sharing or part-time. So we had these in place prior to the pandemic. So what we did is we reintroduced those as we started bringing people back to the office, and we did this on a global basis, and the uptake has been much more significant. Management is much more acceptant because they can see it can work. And I think a lot of folks realize, if I don't do this, I'm going to lose good talent. And so we're on a very similar concept that Carolyn mentioned with Sherwin-Williams. Our guidelines are typically for telework, 3 days in, 2 days out. We'll continue to reassess that. But look, we have a number of people where they're working remotely now. That's working well, and some jobs are really okay with that. We very similar to the culture of Sherwin-Williams. We feel we're better together, and so during a time of crisis when people had to be remote, the effort that went through to create results, our teams did a fantastic job. I mean, I couldn't have been prouder. People were making decisions on the fly, and I'd say 98% of the time they were exactly right. But what you found over time, people were getting burned out. They were working. We did some. The nice thing about using the Microsoft tools, it allows you to do some analytics around how much time people are in meetings, how many people are in meetings. And what we found is meeting time, work time actually went up 20%, people working 20% more. And what the other thing that was happening is, and this is both good and bad, the number of meetings went up, the number of people in meetings went up, so people were being more inclusive. But what we found is people were getting invited to meetings. It's like, well, do I really need to be in that meeting? And so they were feeling overwhelmed because they were getting invited into so many different things. The downside about the remote work is, of course, when it was right out of the gate and I was already an Eaton employee and I had to figure out how this worked, I already knew the people, I knew the processes, I knew how work happened, no big deal. But over time, new people join the org and they don't understand fully the culture. They don't understand all the other people. And there was a gap that started to be created where, folks didn't know each other. And we think that's really important. So not really significantly different than the example Carolyn had. So, we're not going to be completely remote. We want folks in the office. And I'd say for the most part around the globe, most of our locations are back in some form or fashion. So we still have some pockets where teams are out. But I would say from a practice standpoint, having a well-defined flex work solutions that people can understand and they understand how that works, really important. It helps the managers understand, it helps the employees understand. And luckily, we already had this in place before the pandemic hit. Another thing that we spent a lot of time on is, as people were out of the office and as they started to come back, there were many things that we had to do. And actually, Carolyn, I think, hit on basically all of these in her example. So this whole issue around mental health, we spent a lot of time putting training on this for our employees, for our leaders to understand, how this happened. And we did this all through a thing we called Leader X at Eaton, where it's a platform on how we deliver training. And then we also had a series of other things around being intentionally inclusive and showing appreciation. And then, hey, how does this work when we come back from the crisis? This was really important. And of course, we had to do these things in multiple languages around the world. Eaton's, we have 85,000 employees in 80 different countries. And so making sure that we could touch as many of those people as we can in terms of coming back to work was really quite important. So this was interesting and I think very helpful, because people's view on work really changed while they were out. And I think a lot of people reconsidered, hey, how do I want to go about my work? And we get lots of requests. I think that really fed into our flex work, but also there were some other phenomena, and some things were good. I think, believe it or not, our level of connectiveness, where people were reaching out and caring for each other during the pandemic, went up. People were connecting actually more, even though it was virtually. And what we found, we just got our employee survey data back. Our survey scores are at a record high. I was just hoping, boy, if we can just maintain, our employee engagement through the pandemic would be fantastic. But the fact is our numbers went up. They're as high as they've ever been. And I give a lot of credit to the things we focus on: culture, the care we gave for our employees, our ability to connect with a larger community, helping our leaders make sure they're, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we use those in that order. We're listening a lot, showing empathy, being caring and listening were huge pieces of this whole reboarding, retraining deal. Now, one of the other things that came out of COVID that Carolyn touched on was this thing about being inclusive. So what we learned as we started to use technology, we were able to run events that allowed us to include many more people. And we got really good at this technology, whether it's Teams, Zoom. I don't know if any of you have used Miro, but we did our strategic planning process. We were able to include 1,000 employees to provide input into something that normally would have been done by 20, 30 people that were in a meeting room. So it was quite powerful. And I think that really helped people feel dialed in. So we were very intentional about that. So if I think about our lessons learned, this concept of over communicating, just when you think you've communicated, you have to communicate again and again. And look, people wanted to hear from the leaders. So our CEO was very active on town halls, and this trickled down all the way through our organization. And we communicated a lot, and we communicated in advance about what was going to happen. So, because look, people were pivoting. I have kids in school, they're not in class, they're at home. You're going to change how I got to come in, how the work's going to get done. I need time to plan. So we purposely made sure we let people know what was going on. The other thing, and this is probably no surprise, that look, things are changing quickly. So be prepared to pivot. We tend, which maybe goes to the next bullet about progress is better than perfect. So you're going to make decisions in this highly changing environment, and then you're going to go, maybe that decision wasn't correct. Maybe the circumstances changed and we got to move forward, and you got to be open about that and it's okay to pivot. And look, you don't have to get everything perfect before you move forward, because otherwise you won't make a decision, because things are going to continue to change. If you're thinking about flex work, or you already have that in, and depending on the footprint of your company, it is really important around the world, and especially in the United States, that you fully understand the tax ramifications of where people work. And this is really important because look, the municipalities, let's pick the United States, for example, are out of money with all the support and all the things. And now if people are working remotely, where do I owe my taxes? How does that work? Do I even, if somebody's just picked up and moved to Idaho and said, I'm going to work from there, well, do you have the ability to employ somebody in the state of Idaho? You're going to need to know that. And you could also start triggering sales tax obligations inadvertently. So making sure you're connected with your tax team is really important on flex work. Even though it may seem simple, it's not so simple to just pick somebody up and say you can work wherever you want. And this really gets back to your footprint. For those of you that work for companies that are federal contractors like Eaton is, I'm in COVID purgatory right now. Fully understanding the vaccine mandates tied to the executive order is really important, because this will drive how you're going to run your business, how you're going to communicate. So as a federal contractor, we're required to comply with the executive order, and we just last week let 8,000 of our employees know that they'll be required to be vaccinated for us to comply with the executive order.
About 1 minute left. Apologize.
Got it. And then last but not least, this concept around flexibility rules. I mean, we touched about that. We touched on that earlier. You have to, if you're running your business with archaic, very rigid rules, you're going to put yourself at a significant disadvantage, in my opinion. So that's it.
You actually brought up points that I was just about to bring up. We've been monitoring the questions, answers, and there are two primary themes that are showing up so far. The idea of the tax issues are important to people, be important to me also. And then also we had a couple questions regarding, does hybrid work apply to manufacturing and retail employees? So this is the point in the presentation where we're going to be handling the questions. So either Steve or Caroline, which one of you would like to reply first?
Look, I don't mind tackling the tax one, seeing I brought it up. Look, the tax issue is really complicated, especially when you get into like an area like Greater Cleveland, where there's RETA, taxes. Look, Eaton, similar to Sherwin-Williams, is building a new building. We built a new building back in 2013. Well, trust me, the government and the municipalities helped us fund that building. And there's an expectation that people will be driving in their cars to that building to work, because when they're there, they get gas, they buy food, they go to the dry cleaner, they go, right? So to say, hey, look, you guys don't have to come in anymore, it's fine. Well, guess what? That's not really fine. There's an expectations based on the tax agreement we have with the county that people are coming to work, and we have to comply with that. So it's not so easy that we could just say, yeah, you guys go ahead, come in when you want, work remotely. It's not so easy, because we've made commitments to the county that will drive other economic development. And look, we have these throughout the world where we've got infrastructure. And so fully understanding those and how those tie into your flex work practices is quite important. So maybe I'll let Carolyn jump in, because I'm sure they're in a similar boat.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, having our tax department professionals in these conversations with us as we were building our program and, developing what our opportunities were going to be was extremely critical. We are fortunate that we have operations in all 50 states. So when we did have people working from home, some of those issues that you brought up with sales use tax and whatnot, we were already, already involved in those just based on our footprint. But I saw a couple questions in the chat specifically about Ohio and the laws that are changing in January. And yes, so we are going to be tracking our employees' flex work schedule so that we can tax them appropriately, since in January, you're going to have to be taxed based on where you're actually working. So how much time you're physically spending in this building versus how much time you're spending at home, and feeding that information to our payroll department so that they can tax appropriately.
Yeah, and maybe I'll pile on to that. It also stresses your payroll system, right? Because you're required as an employer to withhold tax on where you work, and if you're splitting your time, can your payroll system take tax in multiple places? It's quite complicated, and you want to make sure you don't run afoul of the tax authorities, because look, every municipality is dialing for dollars, right? So they're going to want to make sure they get theirs. And so even though what seems like a very simple, I'm 2 days here and 3 days there, it does create complexities that you really have to fully understand.
All right, let me ask you another question. This is with regard to the other theme of manufacturing and retail. We had a question from somebody else that's in the audience. What adjustments could or should organizations make for people who need to be on site?
So we have our flexible work policy, and there's multiple options to it. And obviously, based on the type of work that they do, there might be some of those options that don't apply. So the hybrid work of working part-time at your physical work location and part-time at home, it doesn't work for our retail employees who we need in front of the customer to be able to sell products, or manufacturing employees who are on the line actually producing our products. So this is where some of the other options with the flexible hours, this different schedules, comes into play so that we can give them more flexibility than they've had in the past to be able to balance their personal needs and work life, but not necessarily the remote option because their jobs don't lend itself to being able to do that.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that, other than one of the phenomenons we've seen recently, especially with we're seeing a lot of older workers, late career workers, they're leaving the workforce. And so our teams have been very creative, especially in our manufacturing facilities, where we might have production workers that need flexibility, like, hey, I got to be able to get my kid on the bus. I can work for you, but I can't start until 8:30, and I can work until 2. And then what we're doing is we're also now offering some people that are on a phase into retirement the ability to also work part-time or reduced schedule to fill in or their training. And so you have to think very creatively and break these old paradigms that, well, you have to work your 8 hours, you have to be here exactly the same time as this person. And now when you have continuous flow, there has to be high levels of cooperation there, because look, when the line's got to keep running. And our teams have really worked out some interesting concepts and levels of flexibility. And what happens is they seem to be more creative when we get the employees involved in the solution versus us trying to solve it for them. So let them bring you a solution and listen to what they're trying to say and see if you can find a way to make it work. And that it's been quite surprising, the creativity that our teams have come up with to allow people to try to, manage their now very complicated lives.
I would say the same. I mean, some of the very creative ideas that have come up, and again, things that if you're not doing the job on a daily basis, you probably didn't even realize were even a possibility. But again, our employees just trying to collaborate and work together of how do we get done what we need to, but in a way that's going to benefit us all, has been fantastic. And again, progress, not perfection, similar to what Steve said, that's our mantra. We might try it. We'll see if it works. If it doesn't, we might have to make some adjustments, but that flexibility and really being willing to try things that you haven't done before.
Mm-hmm.
All right, another question from our chat box. What is one initiative that your companies are working on to create a collective culture, in particular for your new hires that Steve mentioned?
Maybe I'll take a crack at that. So I'm going to rewind a little bit. When during COVID, when a lot of people were not in the office, we put together, we spent a lot of time on how do we do virtual onboarding to get people to understand what it's like to work at Eaton, even though they weren't physically here. And so we put together our talent management org, helped put together, some of it was via virtual learning, a lot of it was via very structured one-on-ones in terms of the onboarding process, until we can get to the point where you could actually physically meet someone. And so that we would assign, a big part of that was we would assign a buddy to every new person so that they had somebody they could talk to say, well, hey, I don't really fully understand how this works. And then look, our HR teams got heavily involved to ensure they were following up with managers in terms of, how to make this go. Now that we're back to work, we're starting to, just put in some of our typical, onboarding processes. They're a little easier to do now that we can physically be together. But what we found is we can actually do things before you even start, because it's virtual, that before we had to wait for you to get there. So we've learned a few things that will keep some of the COVID, we're not in the office practices, and we've now put those into our onboarding practices going forward.
And very similar to what they did at Eaton, had to pivot to a fully online remote onboarding experience for employees. But again, just retooling our managers and giving them a playbook of, okay, think about things you used to do when they were physically in front of you in the office, and how do we replicate as many of those experiences as we can in a virtual manner, and giving them some ideas. And again, that harnessing that collective creativity from, some of our teams, and, collecting the best practices and then sharing them with the managers. Here's a way that you can engage, or, having people assigned to a specific person to be their partner and their buddy, making sure that those were things we were implementing across the organization, so that they could start to get that feeling of our culture and belonging.
Right. Thank you. Here's another theme that actually I've heard myself. This from the chat box. So with hybrid work, are you restructuring your office space requirements, more common areas versus individual offices? In other words, just shrinking that footprint.
So since we're working on our new building, I'll start with that. We have our design set for the new building. And as I said, we're moving to this hybrid model. So we still need workspaces. Individuals need a place to come in when they're in the office. And, we do have plenty of spaces to collaborate and get together when they're in the office. So I think, we were on that path to begin with. And, that's going to work well for us in our new setting when we move to our new building.
Yeah, similar. We work closely with our corporate real estate because, like you just can't quickly turn off that says, hey, I'm in this building and now I want to get into a smaller one. It's not quite so simple. But we did go through and make sure, hey, people that were, if you're not physically going to be here, you may have a workstation here, but if you're really not going to be here, we started, you have to use what, a visitor's office or a visitor's cubicle when you do come to the office. So we started to shrink that down. And then as leases expire and whatnot, we look to say, do we need to stay in this place? Can we take a smaller footprint, and maybe sublet other parts of the building? And in some areas where we had very small, like sales offices or something, as those leases expire, we're having those teams work remotely. But that's gosh, I think we have physical locations, golly, 400 or 500 around the world. I'm sure Sherwin-Williams, because of the retail source, has even more. And so it's a good collaboration with your real estate team in terms of how you wanna operate that, and it really ebbs and flows depending on what the work that gets done and how they do it. But yes, we're looking at all of that.
Thank you. All right, I've got a two-part question here. Some people say the pandemic has and will continue to permanently change how we work, which you two have alluded to already. How true or not is this statement? And if yes, what did you see are the permanent changes?
I think absolutely this hybrid model is here to stay for the foreseeable future. I mean, everything that we're hearing from our employees and our candidates is that, now that we've seen how this works, this is what I need in order to balance, my personal life with my work life. And this is really working for me. And again, I think we found, some benefits to some of the things like the remote work and having people have the ability to put some heads down time and focus on a project when they're at home versus, when you're in the office here, that's your collaboration time. That's your time to work with your partners. So I absolutely think that that's going to stay. And again, we put it into this flexible work policy. So it is something that, we're committing to doing going forward.
I'd say in addition to that, if I think about, you read a lot about a digital mindset, the use of digital tools is now accelerating, right? So I think people have gotten much more comfortable with this at much lower levels of the org. And so that's a good thing. I think you'll see this spill into our shop floor as there's this significant challenge for labor, shop floor automation, robotics, automated artificial intelligence. We're able to do Gemba walks using goggles, and you don't have to travel to the site to actually be at the site. All these things will continue to evolve, and I think you're going to see the workforce in general get much more comfortable with technology. And so this will create, I think, longer term issues around upskilling in terms of the ability for people to manage these tools, and the speed at which work gets done will continue to evolve. And so I think you'll also see, if you look at the demographics around the globe, these will accelerate where work gets done as well. And then I think maybe not directly related to COVID, but from a political standpoint, things around immigration and how you can access labor will also play into the acceleration or deceleration of technology to be able to get work done. I think these things are all going to continue to change at a very rapid pace. And so the current state of it's just so hard to find people is going to advance the use of technology at an even more rapid pace. So, for example, I was in a Walmart the other day. There were 0 cashiers. Everything was self-checkout with one person, because I wanted to buy beer to check my ID. So that's just one example of, you're going to see that in restaurants and other applications where you're going to see technology replacing humans because there's not enough people to do the work.
Good points. All right, we only have a couple minutes left. So in our last couple of minutes, if you could both share with us, what is the one thing you would like our attendees to take away from this hour together?
I think it's flexibility. You have to be flexible. You have to be adaptable. To Steve's point, I mean, the way we work is changing, the environment, the workforce. You're going to have to continue to keep reassessing and reevaluating and being more flexible and thinking differently about how you approach all of these new challenges as they come up.
Yeah, I don't know that I would say anything differently. Maybe only to add, you have to constantly challenge your current thinking about how things get done and how you make decisions and how information travels and how you get your work done. That is going to continue to change. And you have to be comfortable with, so maybe use something that's relevant to Eaton. We grew up as an automotive component supplier, right? So it's all about on-time delivery, Six Sigma, get it right, make sure it's perfect every time. And that mentality bleeds into a lot of the processes and things we do. And we would spend a lot of time getting it perfect before we implemented it, right? And now it's too slow. You have to be able to go, fail fast, pivot, and say, look, we got it wrong. We're going to do it this way. And the environment is changing too fast. And so this flexibility permeates a lot of different areas of how we get our work done. So it's going to be quite different.
All right, thank you. So we're just about out of time. So I want to take this opportunity first to thank our CSU marketing team that's working in the background. They always do a phenomenal job. Dean Kahn for his vision in setting up this Cornerstone series. So please watch your email because there will be additional topics coming up throughout the year. And then, of course, our 2 phenomenal speakers for giving us your time and your expertise, which I'm sure everybody's learned a great deal from. Steve Pallotti of Eaton Corporation and Carolyn Lekan of the Sherwin-Williams. So thank you so much for your time, and everyone have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you.